Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we're looking at the Cold Steel Voyager drop point. I decided to do a full review on this knife again just because I love it so much. All right, so if you're not familiar with Cold Steel Voyager, these got a lot of attention when I was first getting into knives, but frankly, the last couple of years they probably haven't had as much popularity. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, just to kind of remind us all of how good these knives are and how good specifically this knife in particular is. So this video is going to be a bit of a love fest because I do like this knife. One, it's big, it's beefy, it's strong. It's all the things that I love in a folding knife already. So that biases me right from the start. But when you get it and use it, it impresses over and over again. So there's a lot to like about this knife and very little to dislike. There are a couple things to dislike, but not nearly enough to put me off. So I've reviewed a couple of Cold Steel Voyagers in the past. I've had the clip point. In fact, I recently just sharpened the clip point that I reviewed for a friend who I borrowed it from back then. And I've also had like one of the really big ones. I can't remember which particular one. I think the Tanto, Voyager XL Tanto or whatever the full proper name for it is. And like I said, I've really liked them all. And there's a lot to like here. I enjoy, if you're like me, I should say this right away. If you're watching this and you're primarily into knives as accessories and you want them to like match whatever your watch you're wearing that day, then you may not love the Cold Steel Voyager. But if you want just a really utility cutting tool that doesn't cost a whole lot of money but really performs like crazy, this is a pretty stinking good option. All right, and if you don't mind a large knife, we got to touch on this right away. There are some people out there who, and I get them in the comments, I only like 3-inch blades, or I like smaller knives, or whatever. And if that's you, this is probably not your knife, although you still may want to pick one up just because I think it's about the toughest thing you can get for the money. And it's not going to be quite as crazy as like the Cold Steel SR1 Lite or the Formax Lite, which would still be fairly budget friendly options. Although I think they both cost a little more than this, but would be even more pocket filling, even more like gargantuan than this. So we've got 9¼ inches overall. That's the total length here. We've got a 4-inch blade. Essentially, it comes in like a 16th under, 5½ inches closed. All right. So this is a big knife, right? It's 5½ inches closed. It's almost 5/8 of an inch thick. All right, and it's almost 2 inches wide. So this is a knife that definitely takes up some space in your pocket. Now, having said all of that, it's only 5 ounces. So for a really big knife, now here we go. Now we're back to someone who really loves large knives. If you're someone who likes a larger knife, but you don't want something super heavy, you want something that's a little lighter weight, maybe you're a backpacker, or maybe you just don't want that extra weight in your pocket all the time. 5 ounces for a 9¼ inch knife is pretty stinking good. The other thing is, if you've got big hands and because of that you need a knife that gives you a lot of room, the actual choil part of the handle here is 3¾ inches, and that still doesn't account for the fact that you can choke up and treat this sort of area here like a finger choil to get a little tighter on the knife. So like most large knives, okay, what do you know about, it's got a large blade, it's got a large handle, it's big all around. The only real drawback here is, as I kind of went over those numbers, you probably figured out this is going to take up a bit of space in your pocket. All right, so that's something to kind of be aware of. Now, when we get over to the blade, actually, I should point out these were in AUS 8 steel, and now they're in AUS 10, and I'm definitely a fan of the AUS 10. I think it probably came with a small price bump, but not a huge one. And it is really, really good. It's not S35VN, it's not M390, but you're only spending like $70 for this knife. And at that price point, I think VG10, or well, AUS 10, which is very close to VG10 in terms of performance, is great. Okay, this is a flat ground knife. It's moderately thick. Like it's not this crazy beastly blade stock. You know, you're looking at around an eighth of an inch, and it does slice pretty well. You see me doing a bit of cutting here, and this cuts pretty nicely. Um, you know, could it, if it had a hollow grind or something like that, could it be a little bit better? Probably. But remember, this is designed to be sort of a tough, heavy duty, hard use type of knife. And it is that. This is a blade that really inspires a lot of confidence. So we've got drop point, Osten steel, flat grind, stonewash finish. I would have kind of liked it to be a satin finish, but you know, I guess it's okay as it is. It's not super duper thin behind the edge, but it's good enough. And overall, the performance on this, I've really liked it. You know, you can cut up an apple with it, right? You can cut some potatoes or carrots with it. It's thin enough to do that stuff, but it's also thick enough that, you know, if you were lost in the woods and this was the knife you had on you, you wouldn't be worried about breaking it, and you wouldn't feel like I've got to be really careful or hyper vigilant here to not have issues with my blade. So yeah, this is a blade that I think it's really well balanced. All right, I like thicker blades, and I'm not going to apologize for that. This is a little bit thinner, but it's absolutely fine. All right. Now that we've covered the blade, we don't need to say a lot about the lock. It's a triad lock, very strong back lock. I think most of you understand how this works by now by adding this stop pin between the sort of as part of the interface between the locking tooth, which you can't see here, but there's a tooth that comes down that drops into, let's see if I can show you the opening. So there's the opening, right? So you can imagine how this works. As this gets up here, this lock bar is going to fall into that opening you saw a second ago, and that's what's keeping the knife from closing on you. But the stop pin serves to distribute the forces differently and make the whole system really strong. Once every couple years in a cold steel video, I'll take the time to kind of go over that. This is a little bit of a stiffer back lock than my 8010, for example, which we've talked about on the channel lots of times. It's a little bit smoother. This is gonna be a little stiff, and if you're if you're someone who doesn't do a lot of work with your hands, you don't have a lot of upper body strength, you have arthritis, something like that, this could be a bit of an issue for you. Everyone else, I think you should be fine. And if you're not, just, force it until you get used to that extra bit of force. Um, use it over and over again until you get used to that extra little bit of force that's required. I would sort of compare it to my American lawman in this regard. My American lawman is a little bit stiff, and I don't mind it at all. Just have to be kind of aware of it. All right, so that's the lock, super strong triad lock. Let's get to the handle. The handle is FRN with aluminum liners. It's, nice chamfered corners, which is really good. Fairly heavy texturing, which does extend under the clip. So in terms of comfort and ergonomics, this is good. It's a great balance of, smooth, comfortable handle while also being very grippy and giving you a really good bit of traction. As with many cold steel knives, the pocket clip is very stiff, and it usually needs a little bit of help or some modification to get it in and out of your pocket easily. At this point, that's basically a cold steel feature. It's like it has a triad lock and it has a clip that is, a little unruly. That's pretty much cold steel. We do have a lanyard hole there. I can't imagine a use for a lanyard hole on a knife this big, but nonetheless, cold steel gives it to you anyway. And in terms of, I think we've covered everything in terms of construction. It is Torx construction, fairly straightforward in that regard. Now, so we've got kind of all that stuff covered. Let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. First of all, I would say the closest sort of alternative to this from cold steel, if you want to spend a little more money, you would go to the Recon 1. And that is a little bit slimmer, just as tough. You're going to get better steel in G10 instead of the FRN. So a slight upgrade in materials. The design, of course, is a little bit different, and that's, a little bit subjective which one you would prefer. I'm going to do a full side-by-side comparison between these two because they're very close, and they're not that different in price point. The Recon 1 is like $100, and this size, the small size, I guess the large Voyagers are around 70 bucks. So, pretty comparable in price point. Now, if that is really too big and you're one of those guys who's like, Kevin, shut up with these large knives all the time, the American Lawman is a pretty good option. Certainly, very capable knife, much smaller, much lighter, much easier to carry. So that might be more in your wheelhouse if you like a smaller knife, but still want the strength and durability of a cold steel. If that's not enough for you, if you want to forget about the budget offerings and break the bank, you can go to a Formax, which, hold on, let's see if I can get it to fit in frame here, both of them. I don't know if we can do that or not. That's about the closest I can get. Look, I love the Formax. And it's not going to be a knife for everyone, but if you are, the Voyager might be a good place to start. If you love the Voyager and everything it's about, I think it's pretty easy to justify buying a Formax. They're quite different, right? This is higher end, it's more expensive, it's better materials. The Triad lock, by the way, here is quite comfortable, and so there's that to consider as well. So I wanted to throw that in. Finally, I do have a couple of non-cold steel comparisons. Here is another favorite knife of mine. This is the Benchmade Super Freak. And finally, the Spyderco Manix 2 Lockback. All right. I do kind of like lockbacks, and so, some people don't like lockbacks. It's not very fidgety. For me, a knife primarily functioning as a tool, the speed of deployment, close is not that big of an issue. You may want a knife that opens quickly, but close quickly is not quite as critical. So yeah, what do I think about this overall? Look, the price point is pretty reasonable at around 70 bucks. The fit and finish is pretty reasonable for the price point. The materials are good for that price point as well. And if you want something that can really take a beating, right? Maybe you bought a Recon 1, or maybe you bought, a buck 110, or a few other, there are a few other slightly cheaper knives that are still very tough and very capable, and you don't want to break the bank, but you do want something a little more heavy duty. This is a perfect option for that. Right now, you do have to like a large knife, but this is large with a purpose. All right, it's definitely designed to be a heavy duty, hard use, sort of tactical knife. Very comfortable in hand. If you got to do a lot of work with a folder, this is a great option for that as well. And again, to mention, the price point at about 70 bucks, I think is pretty darn reasonable. You can get these over at White Mountain Knives, and I'm not sure about Southern Edge Knife Works. You'll have to check on that one, but they do have some cold steel stuff. I actually recently sent them a message about that. But anyway, for sure, Justin over White Mountain Knives will have some, and I can't promise that he's got this particular version in stock, but you can use my discount code there and save yourself 10%. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.